Good day everyone. I am Nina Malaika Abrosas, and for our report, we are going to tackle about the novels of Rizal. First is the Nali Me Tangere. In Latin translation, Touch Me Not. It is a novel by a Filipino writer and activist Jose Rizal and was published during the Spanish colonial period of the Philippines. It explores perceived inequities in law and practice in terms of the treatment by the ruling government. Spanish Catholic friars of the resident peoples in the late 19th century. The book has since been more commonly published and read in the Philippines in either Tagalog, the most indigenous language, or English. The plot of this novel was Crisostomo Ibarra, the mestizo son of the recently deceased Don Rafael Ibarra, is returning to San Diego town in Laguna after 7 years of study in Europe. Capitan Tiago, a family friend, invites him to a reunion party in Manila. At the party, Crisostomo meets Padre Damaso, who was San Diego's parish priest when Crisostomo left to Europe. Damaso treats Crisostomo with hostility, to the surprise of the young man who regarded the priest as his father's friend. Later, as Crisostomo was walking back to his hotel, Lieutenant Guevara, another friend of his father, informs him that Don Rafael may have been killed for political reasons and Damaso may have been involved. Guevara warns him to be careful. The following day, Crisostomo returns to Tiago's home to meet his childhood sweetheart, Tiago's daughter Maria Clara. As the two flirt and reminisce, Maria reads back to him a part of his farewell letter on his discussion with his father about the state of the country. Ibarra excuses himself eventually as it was time to go to San Diego. Arriving in San Diego, Crisostomo goes to the cemetery and finds his father's grave desecrated. He seeks out the gravedigger, who then tells him that the parish priest had ordered Don Rafael's remains transferred to the cemetery of Chinese, but that he threw the corpse into the lake instead out of fear and pity. At that moment, the town's new parish priest, Padre Salve, passes by, wherein an enraged Crisostomo pushes him to the ground, demanding an explanation. A fearful Salve states that he was only newly assigned to the town, but reveals that Padre Damaso ordered the transfer. Crisostomo decides to forgive and commits to improvements in his town. He plans to build a private school, believing that his paisanos would benefit from a more modern education than what is offered in government schools, which were under the influence of the friars. Enjoying widespread support from the locals and Spanish authorities, Crisostomo's project advances quickly. He receives counsel from Don Anastasio, a local philosopher, and recruits a progressive schoolmaster. Construction was set to begin shortly, with a cornerstone to be laid in a few weeks during San Diego's town fiesta. One day, Crisostomo, Maria, and their friends go on a picnic along the shores of the Laguna de Bay. They discover that a crocodile had been lurking in the Ibarra's fish pens. The boatman jumps into the water with a knife drawn. Crisostomo follows him, and the two subdue the animal together. Elias, the boatman, proclaims himself indebted to Crisostomo. One day of the fiesta, Elias warns Crisostomo of a plot to kill him at the cornerstone ceremony. Sure enough, Crisostomo invades injury and the would-be assassin is killed. During the luncheon, an uninvited Padre Damaso further berates Crisostomo. The other guest his for discretion, but Damaso carries on and insults the memory of Don Rafael. Crisostomo loses control, strikes the friar unconscious, and holds a knife to his neck. Crisostomo tells the guest about Damaso's schemes that resulted in his father's death, but releases Damaso when Maria Clara pleads for mercy. Crisostomo is excommunicated from the church, but has it lifted in Manila through the intercession of the sympathetic Captain General. Returning to San Diego, he finds Maria ill and refusing to see him. Meanwhile, Elias senses Chrysostomos' influence with the government and takes him for a soil so they can talk in private. Elias reveals that a revolutionary group had been trying to recruit him, but he stalled in order to get Chrysostomos' views first. The conversation shifts to Elias' family history. It turns out that Elias' grandfather in his youth worked as a bookkeeper in Manila. But one night, a fire consumes the office and Spanish proprietor accuses him of arson. He was prosecuted and jailed. Upon release, he was shunned by the community as a dangerous lawbreaker. His wife turned to prostitution to support the family. Their lives were ruined. Chrysostomos says that he cannot help and his school project is his focus. Rebuffed, Elias advises Chrysostomos to avoid him in the future for his own safety. However, Elias returned a few days later to tell him of a rogue uprising planned for that same night. The instigators had used Chrysostomos' name in vain to recruit malcontents. Capitan Tiago later on hosts a dinner at his riverside house in Manila to celebrate Maria Clara's engagement with Alfonso Linares, a peninsular who was presented as her new suitor following Chrysostomos' excommunication. Present at the party were Padre Salve, Padre Sibayla, Lieutenant Guevara, and other acquaintances. They spoke of the events in San Diego and Chrysostomos' fate. Salve, who lasted after Maria Clara all along and staged the uprising in order to frame Crisostomo, says he requested to be moved to the convent of the Poor Clares in Manila under the pretense of the San Diego uprising being too much for him. Guevara outlines how the court came to condemn Crisostomo. In a signed letter he wrote before leaving for Europe, Crisostomo spoke of his father, an alleged rebel who died in prison. Somehow, this letter fell into the hands of an enemy, and Chrysostomos' handwriting was copied to create recruitment letters for the uprising. The signature of the letter was similar to Chrysostomos' 7 years before, but not at present day. Crisostomo only had to deny ownership of the signature on the original letter, and the case built on the bogus letters would be dismissed. But upon seeing the letter, which was of course his farewell letter to Maria Clara, Crisostomo lost the will to fight the charges, and he is sentenced to be deported. Guevara then approaches Maria, who had been listening, privately but sorrowfully. He congratulates her for her common sense in yielding the letter. Now, she can live a life of peace. Maria is devastated. Later that evening, Crisostomo, having escaped prison with the help of Elias, confronts Maria in secret. Maria admits giving up his letter because Salvi found Damaso's old letters in the San Diego parsonage, letters from Maria's mother who was then pregnant with her and begging Damaso for an abortion. It turns out that Damaso was Maria's biological father. Salvi promised not to divulge Damaso's letters in exchange for Crisostomo's farewell letter. Crisostomo forgives her, Maria swears her undying love, and depart with a kiss. Crisostomo and Elias slip unnoticed through the Estero de Binondo and into the Pasig River. Elias tells Crisostomo that his family treasure is buried at the Ibarra forest in San Diego. Wishing to make restitution, Crisostomo tells Elias to flee with him to a foreign country where they will live as brothers. Elias declines, stating that his fate lies with the country he wishes to reform. Crisostomo then tells him of his own desire for revolution to lengths that even Elias was unwilling to go. Just then, sentries catch up with their boat and the mouth of the Pasig River and pursue them across Laguna de Bay. Elias orders Crisostomo to lie down and to meet him at his family's mausoleum in the forest. Elias then jumps into the water to distract the pursuers and shot several times. The following day, Maria reads in the newspapers that Crisostomo had been killed by sentries in pursuit. She remorsefully demands of Damaso that her wedding with Linares be cancelled and that she be entered into the cloister or the grave. Seeing her resolution, Damaso admits he ruined Crisostomo because he was a mere mestizo, and Damaso wanted Maria to be happy and secure, and that was possible only if she married a peninsular Spaniard. Knowing why Salvi had earlier requested to be assigned to the covenant of the poor clerks, Damaso pleads with Maria to reconsider, but to no avail. Weeping, Damaso consents, knowing the horrible fate that awaits his daughter within the convent, but finding it more tolerable than her suicide. A few nights later on Ibarra forest, a boy pursues his mother through the darkness. The woman went insane with the constant beating of her husband, the death of her younger son in the hands of Padre Salve, and the loss of her elder son to the Guardia Civil. Basilio, the boy, catches up with Sisa, his mother, inside the Ibarra mausoleum, but the strain had already been too great for Sisa. She dies in Basilio's embrace. As Basilio grieves for his mother, Elias stumbles into the mausoleum, himself dying from his wounds. He instructs Basilio to burn their bodies, and if no one comes to dig inside the mausoleum, he will find treasure, which he will use for his own education. As Basilio leaves to fetch the wood, Elias sinks to the ground and whispers that he will die without seeing the dawn of freedom for his people, and that those who see it must welcome it and not forget those who died in the darkness. Afterwards, it is revealed that Damaso is transferred to a remote town. Distraught, he is found dead a day later. Salve, while waiting for his consecration as a bishop, serves as a chaplain of the convent of the poor clerks. Meanwhile, during a stormy evening in September, two patrolmen reported seeing a specter on the roof of the convent, weeping in despair. The next day, a government representative visited the convent to try to investigate the previous night's events. One of the nuns had a wet and torn gown, and with tears told the representative of tables of horror and begged for protection against the outrages of hypocrisy, strongly suggesting that Padre Salve regularly rapes her when he is in the convent. The abbess, however, said that she was mad. A general also attempted to investigate the nun's case, but by then, the abbess prohibited visits to the convent. Nothing more was said about this nun or, for what matter, Maria Clara.
So now, let's proceed to the second novel of Rizal, the El Filibusterismo. This novel is a sequel to the Noli Me Tangere. It has little humor, less idealism, and less romance than the Noli. It is more revolutionary, more tragic than the first novel. Like Noli Me Tangere, it is written in Spanish also. In English, it is entitled The Reign of Greed. It consists of 38 chapters, and also Rizal dedicated the El Filibusterismo to the Gomborza. Evidently, Rizal, in all years of his studies, travels, and labors in foreign lands, had not forgotten the martyrdom of Father Gomez, Burgos, and Zamora, which Pasiano related to him when he was a mere lad in Calamba. Rizal took 3 years to write his second novel. Rizal began writing El Filibusterismo in October 1887 while he was in Calamba. In London, 1888, he revised the plot and some chapters. Rizal continued to work on his manuscript in Paris. He later moved to Brazil, where the cost of living was cheaper and he would be less likely to be distracted by social events, so he could focus on finishing the book. September 18, 1891, the novel was published in Gent, partially funded by Rizal's friend Valentin Ventura. Valentin Ventura is the savior of the second novel of Rizal, the El Filibusterismo. Dahil nung nawala na ng pag-asa si Rizal, wala na siyang pera, wala na siyang pang-printing ng El Filibusterismo, Valentin Ventura in Paris learned on Rizal's predicament and immediately sent him the necessary funds para ma-resume ang printing ng El Filibusterismo. Nung natapos na ang printing ng El Filibusterismo, Rizal immediately sent 2 printed copies to Hong Kong, one for Basa and other for Secto Lopez. Rizal gratefully donated the original manuscript and an autographed printed copy to Valentin Ventura. Rizal sent complimentary copies to Blumentritt, Mariano Ponce, Graciano Lopez Haina, Antonio Luna, T.H. Pardo de Tavera, Juan Luna, and other friends. The El Nuevo Régimen Liberal Madrid newspaper serialized the novel in its issue of October 1891. Original manuscript of El Filibusterismo in Rizal's own handwriting is now preserved in the Filipiniana Division of the Bureau of Public Libraries in Manila, acquired by Philippine government from Valentin Ventura for 10,000 pesos. The El Filibusterismo has also objectives. Number 1, to discuss what religion and belief can really do to everyday lives. Number 2, to expose the cruelties, graft, and corruption of the false government and honestly show the wrongdoings of Filipinos that lead to further failure. Number 3, to defend Filipino people from foreign accusation of foolishness and lack of knowledge. Number 4, lastly, to show how the Filipino people lived during the Spanish colonial period and the cries and woes of countrymen against abusive officials. Let's proceed to the synopsis of the El Filibusterismo. The story in El Filibusterismo revolves around its main character, Simon, who is a rich jeweler. So let's proceed to the synopsis of the El Filibusterismo. The story in El Filibusterismo revolves around its main character, Simon, who is an... So now, let's proceed to the synopsis of the El Filibusterismo. The story in El Filibusterismo revolves around its main character, Simon, who is a rich jeweler. Simon is Crisostomo Ibarra of the Nolime Tangere, whom everyone thought had been killed by the Guardia Civil at Laguna de Bay. He had escaped, fled to Cuba, become wealthy, and made connections with influential Spanish officials. Upon his return to the Philippines, after many years, he becomes very influential as the Governor General who owes so much to him, consult him in making decisions. In reality, however, everything Simon does is just part of his grand plan to take revenge against the Spanish official and rescue Maria Clara from the convent. Planning to stage a revolution, he smuggles arms and looks for followers mainly from the exploited and abused natives. One of his recruits is Basilio, the son of Sisa, who with Capitan Tiago help was able to study in Manila. Simon also alias with the revolutionary group of Cabezantales, a former cabeza de barangay who suffered maltreatment at the hand of the friars. Using his influence, Simon encouraged corruption, decadence, and more oppressive government policies so that the citizen may become more interested. However, the planned revolt one night was not carried out because Simon, upon hearing that Maria Clara died in the nunnery, decided not to give the signal for the outbreak of the uprising. Another plan was made some months later. At the venue of the wedding reception of Juanito Pilaes and Paulita Gomez, Simon planted many explosives enough to kill the guests, primarily the priors and government officials. According to the plot, the big explosion shall be started by the gift he would give to the newlywed at the reception, a kerosene lamp with explosive. When the lamp flickers and Simon turns the wick, it will result in a big explosion that will become a signal to the revolutionary troops, simultaneously attack all government buildings in Manila. During the reception, Simon gave his gift to the newlywed. Before hurriedly leaving the venue, he leaves a piece of mysterious paper bearing the message, "You will die tonight. signed by Juan Crisostomo Ibarra. Meanwhile, Isagani, the rejected love of Paulita, is standing outside the reception. His friend Basilio tells him to leave the place because the lamp will soon blow up. When Father Salve identifies the handwriting in the note and confirms that it was indeed Ibarra's, the guests begin to panic. When the lamp flickers, Father Irene tries to turn the wick up, but Isagani wanted to save Pauleta's life, rushes into the house, grabs the lamp, and throws it into the river where it explodes. Simon's revolutionary plot was thus known. He is thus hunted by the law enforcers. He managed to escape, but he was seriously wounded. Carrying his jewelry chest, he finds shelter in home of Padre Florento by the sea. Learning of his presence in the house of the priest, the Guardia Civil informs Padre Florento that he will come in the evening to arrest Simon. Simon then takes poison that he would not be caught alive. As the poison effects start to take a toll on his body, he confesses to Florento his true identity and his plan of revenge through bloody revolution. After the emotional and agonizing confession of the dying man, the priest absolves the undying man from his sins, saying, "God will forgive you, Señor Simon. He knows that we are fallible. He has seen that you have suffered. He has frustrated your plan one by one, first by the death of Maria Clara, then by lack of preparation, then, in some mysterious way, let us bow to his will and render him thanks." The story ends with the priest throwing Simon's treasures into the sea so that they would not be used by the greedy. The priest hopes when the right time comes, they would be recovered and used only for the good.
Gandang araw sa inyong lahat. Ako nga po pala si Rusmila P. Mangotara. At ngayon, ipagpapatuloy natin ang pagtalakay sa nobela ni Rizal, which is ang pangatlong nobela. May 6 na hindi natapos na nobela si Rizal. Ang unang hindi natapos na nobela ay Walang Pamagat. Ayon kay Lupis Zaina, nasa isip na ni Rizal na magsulat ng ikatlong nobela noong September 22, 1891, 4 na araw pagkatapos lumabas ang El Feliz sa pamamahayag. Noong October 18, 1891, sumakay si Rizal sa Bapol Merbol sa Mercedes patungong Hong Kong. Sa paglalayag ay sinimulan niyang isulat ang ikatlong nobela sa Tagalog na nilayon niya para sa kanyang mambabasa. Sa Hong Kong ay pinagpatuloy niya ito, ngunit sa ilang kadahilanan ay hindi niya ito natapos. Ang nobela ay binuo ng 44 na pahina sa kamay sulat ni Rizal, na saan yung manuskrito pa rin ito. Makikita ito sa National Library sa Maynila. Ang kwento ng hindi natapos na nobelang ito ay nagsisimula sa may taimtim na paglilibing kay Prinsipe Tagulima, anak ni Sultan Zaidi ng Ternate, sa Malapad na Bato, isang malaking bato sa pampang ng Pasig River. Si Sultan Zaidi kasama ang kanyang maharlikang pamilya at retainer ay kinuha ng mga Kastila noong panahon ng digmaan sa Malukas at dinala sa Maynila. Ang matandang sultan at kanyang mga anak, gayon din ang kanyang mga tagasunod ay pinangakuan ng mabuting pakikitungo. Ngunit nakalimutan ng mga Kastila ang kanilang pangako at hinayaan silang mamatay isa-isa sa paghihirap. Ang bayani ng nobela ay si Kamandagan, isang apo ni Lakandula, huling hari ng Tondo. Nagbalak siya na mabawi ang nawalang kalayaan ng kanyang ama. Isang araw ay iniligtas niya ang kanyang dalawang magagandang apo na sina Maligaya at Sinagtala mula sa mga malibog na Kastila, ang Cora at ang Encomendor ng Bay Laguna. Ang pangalawang hindi natapos na nobela ay pinamagatang Makamisa. Sa English ay literal na nangangahulugang pagkatapos ng misa. Isang nobela sa Tagalog. Ito ay nakasulat sa magaan na sarcastic na estilo at ito ay hindi kumpleto dahil 2 kabanata lamang ang natapos. Ang manuskripto ay binubuo ng 20 na pahina. Ang isa pang nobela na sinimulang isulat ni Rizal ay pinamagatang Dapitan. Ito ay hindi natapos, nakasulat sa Aaronic na Espanyol. Isinulat niya ito noong siya ay pinatapon upang ilarawan ang buhay at kaugalian ng bayan. Ang manuskrito ay binubuo ng 8 na pahina. Ang ika-4 ay isang nobela sa Espanyol tungkol sa buhay sa Pili, isang bayan sa Laguna, hindi rin natapos. Ang manuskrito ay binubuo ng 147 na pahina. Ito ay walang pamagat. Kabilang sa karakter ay sina Padre Agaton, isang Espanyol ng Fraile, Kapitan Panchong at Kapitana Barang, Cecilia, ang kanilang magandang anak na babae, Isagani, manliligaw ni Cecilia, Kapitan Crispin, karibal sa politika ni Panchong, at si Dr. Lopez, isang malayang mag-iisip. Ang ika-5 nobela ni Rizal ay wala rin itong pamagat. Ito ay tungkol kay Cristobal, isang kabataang Pilipinong mag-aaral na bumalik mula sa Europa. Ang manuskrito ay binubuo ng 34 na pahina. Kabilang sa karakter ay si Cristobal na nag-aral ng 12 taon sa Europa. Amelia ang kanyang syota, si Kapitan Ramon ang ama ni Cristobal, isang Dominican fraile at isang Espanyol na tenyente ng Guardian Civil. At panghuli, ang ika-6 na hindi natapos na nobela ni Rizal ay nakapaloob sa 2 kwaderno. Ang unang kwaderno ay naglalaman ng 31 nakasulat na pahina at ang pangalawa ay 12 nakasulat na pahina. Sa pamamagitan ng buwan ng celestial character, inilarawan ng may akda ang nakakalungkot na kalagayan ng Pilipinas. Ang hindi natapos na nobelang ito ay nakasulat sa Espanyol at ang estilo ay balintuna. Iyon lamang po at maraming salamat.